just for orientation, these are the 8:18 p.m. and 4:34 a.m. scans.
Yes.
When Mrs. Freudberg was in the hospital at Martin Memorial, did she continue to bleed?
Yes. Could you maybe turn the lights down on this side?
You got the noise.
So again, blood looks bright on CT. This doesn't look very bright, and this looks brighter, showing that there's been progressive bleeding during this time in the hospital.
And just so we get a clear record here, this and that, the 8:18 p.m. scan.
Right. The 11:19 scan shows a little bit of bleeding, and the 11:20 scan shows more bleeding.
And are these two films, the comparison of the two films, consistent with a reperfusion injury as you've described?
Yes, very much so.
Now help us understand what we have here on the screen.
What we have here on the screen are two slices that are higher up. This is from November 19th. This is from November 20th, 8 p.m., 4 a.m. Here we can see she not only had the big stroke that you've heard about in the left cerebellum, she also had a small stroke here on the right. This is in the area of the visual cortex that controls vision. So she had a small stroke here, and then you'll see that this stroke also, in the hospital, started becoming hemorrhagic. So there's a little bit of white there that is from this stroke also beginning to bleed, and that's why she's in the hospital.
So
Also, incidentally, let me just mention that
are the ventricles shown on the films?
the ventricles are normal. There is no evidence of hydrocephalus.
And just for the jury's benefit, what is hydrocephalus?
Hydrocephalus is if you get a blockage. Well, basically, this is your brain, and then you have also these spaces that contain fluid called ventricles in the brain. And the fluid is made here in the brain, and then it drains out through a series of channels. And if one of those channels is blocked, the ventricles will enlarge, and then you'll get something called hydrocephalus. This is very serious, or it can be very serious, because your skull is an enclosed space. It does not expand. So if the ventricles expand, it's going to push the brain, and if it gets really, really serious, it can lead to death.
And in this case, Mrs. Freudberg, if you look at her image, first at 8:18 p.m., is there any indication whatsoever of hydrocephalus, this enlargement of these ventricles?
No.
And then if you compare it to the latter film at 4:34 a.m., is there any indication that Mrs. Freudberg ever had hydrocephalus?
No. In hydrocephalus, ventricles get very, very big. They balloon up like this.
Now, help us understand, you mentioned a couple moments ago a different area of the brain than we've talked about. We've talked about left cerebellum, and you've shown us those on the images.
Right.
The arrows here, what are they? What area of the brain is that?
This is the right occipital lobe, and she had a small infarct in this region as well.
And can you help us understand when that right occipital lesion, that stroke occurred?
Yes. It looks like it's the same age. It has a little bit of mass effect and swelling, and it's about the same darkness as the other infarct.
Does that indicate to you that the right occipital region and the left cerebellum were both infarcted, ischemic infarcts at the same time?
Yes, and this is actually a very common thing, because these two areas are both fed by the same blood vessel.
And let me ask you, the 8:18 p.m. film, the right occipital ischemic infarct, is there any bleeding there at that time?
No, you can see there's no white here at all.
Then if we compare that to 4:34 a.m., do we see bleeding associated with the right occipital infarct?
Yes, right there you can see there's a little bit of white, so it's beginning to bleed.
Does that indicate that she had hemorrhagic transformation of that right occipital lesion while she was in the hospital?
Yes, that's exactly what it means.
All right, so these next slices, is this similar to what you just explained to us about the right occipital lesion?
Yes.
And again, the right occipital region, is that associated with vision?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that these lesions in the right occipital lobe, the infarct there, and the infarct of the cerebellum likely occurred at the same time.
Yes.
How does that happen?
Basically, there is one blood vessel that feeds both of these areas in the back of the brain. And you can easily have clots that go up this vessel, and then they split into either the right or the left. So this is actually a very, very classic, common finding for MLI.
And when we talk about an ischemic infarct, this is the blockage of the vessel, is that commonly an embolic event where a piece of plaque ruptures and blocks the vessel?
Often, yes. That's one of the most common things.